this chapter, we will be looking at topics related to measurement. In this lesson, we will be introducing the imperial system.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the imperial system, and we have to do this. Now, granted, there's only, I believe, 3 countries in the world that aren't using the metric system. But, however, our closest neighbor and our largest trading partner is still using the imperial system. The United States still uses the imperial system. That was developed in England, and I've actually heard varying accounts as to what everything kind of means, all the different units of measurement in the imperial system. So let's just put it as this right now. There's nothing wrong with the imperial system as a means of measurement. I mean, it's fine. It is, however, the conversions are a little bit more awkward than they are in the metric system, okay? And so what we want to do in this lesson here is get you comfortable with the conversions, okay? Or at least having an idea of what to do, and then maybe encouraging you to use your calculator or whatever here. However, the more comfortable you get with conversions in the imperial system, I promise you, the better off you're going to be with fractions. Okay, fractions will make more sense to you if you get really good at this kind of conversion here. Anyway, so let's just take a quick look here. The smallest unit of measurement that we're going to use in the imperial system is the inch. Okay, now the inch is supposed to be roughly the width of, and actually this one's pretty close, the width of my thumb, or the width of your thumb here. Okay, that's at least one way of thinking about it. It's a good referent, let's say. Okay, now normally what we'll do in the imperial system here is we'll break it into fractions. So for example, right here, there's my ½ inch, and then often what you'll see is you'll see these little lines here that get a little bit longer, and right there, there's my quarter, here's my 3/4 mark, and then we break it down, we got the eighths, and then even down to the 16ths. Now oftentimes you will see that the rulers will break it down to the 16ths. Now if you've got a measuring tape, usually the first foot of a measuring tape is actually broken down one further into 30 seconds. I don't know whether you need that or not, but I would probably guess in most cases you probably don't, but it's there if you want it. Okay? So the way we typically make measurements in the imperial system along a ruler or whatever is to use mixed fractions. I'll give you an example right here. Now there has been a little bit of an error here, but we'll fix that in just a moment. So take a look. Here's our ruler. Now this has been zoomed in a little bit because that's substantially more than an inch, but we're trying to get an idea of how the measurement works. So this dark line here is 1, 2, 3, 4 complete inches here. Now remember that the smallest tick marks here, the smallest distances here represent 1/16ths of an inch. So from the 4 mark we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now it's between the 7th and the 8th, but it's closest to the 7. So this is going to represent 4 7/16ths of an inch. Now you're going to notice here it says, therefore the measurement of the line is 4 4/16ths. Okay, well, that's actually not what that line is. But let's take a quick look at what that measurement would have been. Okay, and actually, hold on a second. I'm going to yank out. I wasn't going to do this, but I am going to do this. I'm going to pull out. Oh, would you look at that? I am so efficient and clean. I cleaned up that ruler that I had. Don't. Okay, that's okay. I will use the side of my my calculator here. So 4 4/16ths. Here's 4. 4/16ths would be 1, 2, 3, 4 right here. So that line would look something like that. Okay, that line, and I'll darken that up a little bit here so it's clearer. This line here would be my 4 inches and 4/16ths. And see, then what we would do with that 4/16ths is then we would reduce it to 1/4, so 4 1/4 inches. Okay? So, let's have a quick look. Just like we did with the metric system, we're going to think about what some reference are. What are some things that you have access to all the time? Okay, or at least you have a really good, clear mental image of that we can relate to these units of measurements here. Well, for an inch, and that's the abbreviation IN, your referent is typically like the thumb length, probably better stated as the width. Okay, you can think of it as if you want to think of it this way, as the length from joint to tip. Some people, it's closer to think of it this way, okay, that this distance right here is an inch. For me, the width, when I press it down, the width of my thumb is closer to an inch. Okay, anyway, there we go. And this is kind of our basic unit right here, so that's why there's no relationship to the other units here. We're going to build these relationships up from here. The foot, FT, and roughly speaking, it's the length of your foot. Okay? Now, again, that's not true for everybody, but on average, yeah. And 1 foot is typically going to be 12 inches. The next step up is a yard. And that's about an arm span, okay, or an adult pace. Now, when we say arm span, we're not talking like if somebody puts their arms out like this from there to there. No, it's typically like you put one arm out from about your nose out to the end of your hand there. That's typically about a yard, okay, roughly speaking. And 1 yard is 3 feet. And because each foot is 12 inches, 1 yard is 36 inches. Okay. Now, another way of doing this is the adult pace. That's just why you'll see a lot of times when guys are out playing football and whatnot, and they're counting yardage, they'll just walk it out, and that's close enough. Then we go up to a mile, okay, and it's the distance walked in about 20 minutes. Okay. Now, 1 mile, and here's where the conversions get a little awkward here. 1 mile is 1,760 yards. Okay, 1 mile is 5,280 feet. Now, up to this point, the fact that a foot is 12 inches and the fact that a yard is 3 feet, that's not all that hard to work with. But now this starts to get a little bit more awkward, and you can probably see right here why the metric system is, it really, in terms of conversion, superior to the imperial system. Okay, but again, they're both equally useful. You can communicate measurements accurately and precisely with both. It doesn't really matter. Just in terms of sheer conversion, the metric system's got a bit of a leg up on the imperial system. Okay, so for measuring distances or lengths, units of measurement, here we are: inches, feet, yards, and miles. Okay, and so again, remember how this works here. Now we're going to have to talk about the conversion factors. We're going to have to use these guys up here to help us convert here. But when we go from small unit to large unit, okay, small to large unit, the value gets smaller. But if we go from large unit to small unit, the value, the number gets larger. Okay. Now we're going to run through and do some examples. All right. Now let's take some time here to do some conversions. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use this chart over here, which is basically the information that I gave you a little bit earlier here. Okay, so we're going to convert yards into miles, and I'm going to create a conversion factor here because it makes a little bit more sense to do that here. With the metric system, it was just a matter of moving the decimal. It's not quite so straightforward here. So 4,031 yards. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to multiply this by a fraction where I've got, now I want to have miles here. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit on this. I want to have miles in the numerator and yards in the denominator. Okay? Now, I come over here. 1 mile is 1,760 yards. Okay, so 1 mile is 1,760 yards. The yards units will cancel, and so 4,031 divided by 1,760, that's my answer here. So now I'm just going to go to my calculator here. So 4,031 divided by 1,760, and I'm going to get, and I'll just round this to the nearest tenth here, 2.3 miles. Okay, so there's my conversion factor. That's how I want you to start thinking this thing through here. Now, let's convert miles into inches. Now, I don't have a miles to inches conversion here, but I do have miles to feet to inches. So that's what I'll do. So 14 miles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this into feet first. Now I want feet left over in the numerator and miles to cancel. And when I look at that, I notice that I've got 5,280 feet per 1 mile. Now, when I think about that, it's like, well, my number here is going to get larger because I'm going to multiply it by 5,280 divided by 1. But that's exactly what I want. When my units get smaller, I want the number to get larger. But I don't want to be left with feet in the numerator. I want to be left with inches. So I'm going to multiply this by some sort of conversion factor between inches and feet. Again, I want miles to cancel. I want the feet to cancel. So all I'm left with is inches. And I know that there are 12 inches in 1 foot. So to get this conversion, I'm going to multiply 14 by 5,200, whoops, I'm doing this on the calculator while I say it, 2,080 multiplied by 12. And we get a whopping 887,040 inches. And yeah, that I'm happy with that. I knew it had to get a lot bigger. Okay, now let's convert yards to inches. 5 yards. So what I need is some sort of conversion factor between yards and inches. I want yards in the denominator so it cancels and I'm left with inches in the numerator. And I know, because I saw this just on the other sheet here, that 1 yard is 36 inches. Okay, so when I multiply this out, again, my number is going to get bigger, but that's okay because my units got smaller. And 5 times 36 is going to be 180. So 5 yards is 180 inches. Okay. Now let's convert miles to yards. Now, just a few seconds ago we did yards to miles. Now we're doing the opposite here. So 5 miles. I'm going to multiply this by a conversion factor. I want to get rid of the miles. I want to be left with yards. So yards in the numerator, miles in the denominator. Okay, and I know that 1 mile is 1,760 yards. Again, when I multiply that out, the number is going to get larger, but that's okay because I'm using a smaller unit here. And when you multiply 5 times 1,760, you get 8,800. And again, I'm happy with that. My units got smaller, my number got larger. Good. Now we're going to convert miles to feet. Okay, well, 4 miles is where we start, so we're going to use this conversion factor. I want miles in the denominator, feet in the numerator. And I mean, I just got a glance, I can see it right there. 1 mile is 5,280 feet. My miles cancel, I'm left with 4 times 5,280 feet. And I'll get, when I do this on my calculator, 21,120 feet. Okay, now let's convert feet to miles. Now we haven't done a lot where we go from small to large, so I'm assuming my number is going to get smaller here. So 12,640 feet. I'm going to use a conversion factor that puts feet now in the denominator and miles in the numerator. And the conversion is 1 mile is 5,280 feet. Now I'm putting a large number in the denominator, but that's okay because I want to divide by this. Now remember, 12,640, when I multiply this by the fraction here, I multiply the 1 by that, and then I multiply this 1 by the 5,280. So ultimately, I'm going to take 12,640, and I'm going to divide it by 5,280. And I'll get to the nearest tenth that's 2.4 miles. Okay, and I did expect the number to get smaller because my unit got larger. Good. 350 yards to feet. Actually, this is a pretty straightforward one. Okay, because the conversion here is actually quite nice. I want to put yards in the denominator, feet in the numerator, because I want the yards to cancel. And I know that 1 yard is 3 feet. So that's really just going to be 350 times 3. Or 1,050 feet. And then down here, again, we're going from small unit to large unit, so I do expect the number to get smaller. So 63,360 inches. I don't have a direct conversion from inches to miles, but I do have one from inches to feet, and then from feet to miles. So let's do that. So inches to feet. I want inches in the denominator, I want feet in the numerator, and I know that 1 foot is 12 inches. So initially I'm going to divide this number by 12. Okay, the 63,360 by 12. That will give me an answer in feet. But then I want the feet to disappear and I want miles to be left over. And I know that 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So initially I'm going to take my 63,360 divided by 12, and then I'm going to divide that result by 5,280. Okay, so now I'm just going to go to my calculator and do that. So 63,360 divided by 12 actually is 5,280, and when I divide 5,280 by 5,280, I get 1. So it turns out 63,360 inches is 1 mile. Okay, I actually didn't see that coming. All right, so this next question says that a flea can measure 1/16 of an inch in length. A scale of 80 to 1 is used to enlarge it. For a diagram in a textbook, how long to the nearest inch is the drawing of the flea? Okay, now this is a true scale here because the units are the same. Okay, I haven't had to indicate, that I'm going from inches to feet or whatever like that, which makes perfect sense because I'm putting this in a textbook. Let's have a quick look here. So my scale is 80 to 1, meaning drawing to real is 80 to 1. Okay, drawing to real. And I have to build a proportion here. And this is going to be, okay, well, real was 1/16 of an inch. Okay, 1/16 of an inch, and I don't know how big the drawing is going to be in the textbook, but I do know that the scale is 80 to 1. So what I will do here, because I've got a proportion set up, which is fraction equal to fraction, here is the only spot where I can legitimately do that cross multiplying. 1 times x is x, and then this becomes 80 times 1/16. Okay? And so, actually, I won't do it there. I'll do it up here. Okay? And so now what we'll do here is 80 times 1/16 turns out is 5. But bear in mind that inches, there was nothing to cancel that inches, and so this becomes 5 inches. Basically, the 1/16 times 80 is going to end up being 5 inches. So the drawing is 5 inches long, I guess. There you go. All right, now in this question we read that an art student includes a tree measuring 6.8 inches on her landscape painting. She used a scale of 1 to 150 to determine the actual height of the tree to the nearest foot. Okay. Now the scale that we're using, okay, was 1 to 50. There's no units shown there. That's a true scale. But I want the answer in terms of feet. Now, when I do the conversion here, it's going to be in inches. And then what I'll do is I'll convert my answer to feet when I'm done. So here's my scale, 1 to 150, drawing to actual, is going to equal, now I know that in my drawing, or her drawing, it's 6.8 inches over x. Don't know how big it is. But I've got a proportion, and so now I'll do my cross multiplication. So 1 times x is x, and then 6.8 times 150. Now that's 6.8 inches, so times 150 inches, that's going to be in inches at the end. So 6.8, I'll go to my calculator, times 150. And I get that x is equal to 1,020 inches. So that's how tall the actual tree is. But that's in inches. So now what I want to do is I'm going to convert that into feet. So now I'm going to multiply this by my conversion factor. I want the inches to go away, so I'm going to put inches in the denominator. I'll put feet in the numerator, and then I know that 1 foot is 12 inches. Inches cancel. So now remember what this means, okay? Because I know some of you are doing this kind of funky. There's a growing number of people that have a very wrong idea of how to multiply a number by a fraction. This is like 1,020 over 1. You multiply the numerator and then you multiply the denominators. It essentially, ultimately, I'm going to end up doing 1,020 over 12, and this will be my feet here. Now I'll go to my calculator, 1,020 divided by 12, and it turns out this is 85 feet. Okay, so the tree is 85 feet tall. All right, in this question we read that Alex purchased 7 yards of ribbon to trim some napkins. The ribbon is sewn around the napkin, which is 14 inches wide and 16 inches long. How many napkins can Alex trim with this ribbon? Okay, now you gotta be kind of careful with this. First of all, we need to figure out how much ribbon is going to be necessary around each napkin. And so what we're told here is that this is 14 inches wide and 16 inches long. But now I want you to think about this. When you put ribbon around this, okay, you wouldn't typically do this. Okay, normally you would fill these little squares in. Okay, now, so this question here really needs a little bit more information for us to figure out how to do this. We would kind of need to know how wide that ribbon is so that we know how much extra we need to do here. Like right now, putting the trim around it, we're not really putting the trim around the whole thing. We're leaving the corners blank here. But for the time being, that's okay. Okay? Because right now, really, the question isn't so much about trimming these things as about how many of these can we make here. So what's the perimeter? Well, it's going to be 2 times 14 plus 2 times 16. So now actually, another way to think about this is that's going to be just twice the sum of these two here. Well, 14 and 16 is 30, and twice those is going to be 60. So we're looking for a perimeter of 60. Now, that's 60 inches. We know that Alex has 7 yards worth of ribbon here. So what we're going to need to do here is convert the yards into inches, or convert the inches into yards, one way or the other, and then do a comparison that way. I think it's probably easier to convert the 7 yards into inches. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the yards. We're going to put the yards in the denominator. We'll put the inches up here in the numerator, so the yards cancel. And we know that 1 yard is 36 inches. So that means 7 times 36 will be 252 inches. Okay, so now we've got 252 inches total, and we need to break that into 60-inch chunks, and each one of those chunks can be used to make the lace around a napkin, sort of. Okay, sort of. So in this particular case here, let's take that 252 inches. We're going to divide that by 60 inches. And notice the inches are going to cancel, and that's okay, because what we're looking for at the end here is how many can we make here. We get 4.2. Well, okay, 0.2 of a trimmed napkin is not a trimmed napkin, so we got 4 napkins here. Okay, in this question here we read that one of Eric's steps is 18 inches long. Okay, how many steps would he walk in a mile? Okay, so let's figure this out here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually convert a mile into steps. So 1 mile, actually I'll use the abbreviation here, 1 mile. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to convert it into inches. I don't have a direct conversion right now from miles to inches, but I do have one from miles to feet. So mile, feet, so 1 mile was 5,280 feet. And I do that so that the miles cancels. So now I'll have a number of feet. What I want to do now is convert feet into inches. So I'll put a feet down here, inches here, and 1 foot is 12 inches. Now that still doesn't answer the question here, because really what I wanted to do is I wanted to convert this into steps. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to introduce another conversion factor here, steps and inches. So here the feet will cancel, and now the inches will cancel. And watch how this works here. This time 1 step is 18 inches. Now when I plug this all in and evaluate it, I'm going to be left with just the units steps here. Okay, now this is going to be, now look at the way this works here. The numerators are all multiplied together, the denominators are all multiplied together. So it's going to be 5,280 times 12, okay? And then I'm going to divide by 18. And when I do that, it turns out I get 3,520 steps. So he would take 3,520 steps in a mile.